Ashish Bhandari, Managing Director and CEO Thermax, joins in right now on the show to talk about all of that and more. Ashish, I would have started off the conversation with DeepSeek as well, because that seems to be the talk of town, really. but can I, because we were just talking about the liquidity measures that the Reserve Bank of India has announced, can I for a moment start this conversation with that? It was the need of the hour. Corporates were saying that liquidity is amiss in the system, and coming March, come March, the requirements will be even more. Have you got a chance to look at what the RBI has done overnight, and or last evening rather, and does that ease the stresses around liquidity for corporates?
Good morning, Neeraj, and thank you for having me on the show. I have seen some of the announcements and the decisions by the RBI last evening. Too early to say whether this will start to help on the liquidity front or whether this is enough. This will definitely help. Whether this is enough or not, we'll have to wait to see what else the RBI does. The last couple of quarters, there has been signs that liquidity has been potentially driving down decision making, and especially investment in private Capex. And some of that has been showing up in our relatively soft GDP numbers and industrial growth numbers as well. Some of the decisions from the RBI yesterday, and hopefully other decisions that get made over the next month, should help improve things.
Okay. Mr. Bhandari, very good morning. Tamanna here as well, and great to speak with you today, especially, as we're setting up the wish list for India Inc. on the union budget coming up. What do you think is the need of the hour? I mean, the easy answer is Capex. But in terms of the expectations of what will really flow, what would you be looking out for very carefully in the finance minister's speech?
I think the last few budgets, the finance minister has been pretty consistent. Practical decision making, I don't think we can expect too many big bang moves. The moves will be a lot more consistent. The three big things to look for is first, keeping the deficit relatively tight, because that's what drives inflation, many other metrics. So keep the deficit under control, get as close to 4.5% as possible. Second, keep government Capex high. I think this is something that was happening for a few years. Post-budget, we saw a bit of a slowdown, but we would expect the government to keep spending the way it has, and the government's earning well through GST and other receipts. The third thing I would say is the freebies should be, and including for the energy industry, wherever, subsidies minimum, freebies minimum, whatever money we collect should go into to smart expenditure, which ultimately keeps inflation low and stimulates Capex. So the levers I think the government has to play with are relatively few if these constraints are put. So I am expecting a practical, consistent budget, no big moves, continuing to work these levers.
Just on the point of the freebies, I thought that was interesting, Mr. Bhandari. And if you could just go a little deeper on that. When you say freebies, do you mean even any kind of incentives for your industry that could come in or could impact your industry positively? Because usually before the budget, what companies are asking for is the exact opposite. They want the freebies, though it wouldn't be called freebies in the context of corporates.
I think we keep asking for those, and we keep looking at the budgets and we don't see them. Yeah, the subsidy regime is one that the government's looking to look beyond. I think there'll be more PLI kind of incentives, more requests for regulation to be cleaned up, and helping industries take off by clarifying rules in hydrogen, in green transportation, shipping, bio-CNG, whatever the case may be. Yeah, and look to areas where we can do import substitution, bring natural gas under the GST regime, providing incentives for growth, but definitely not freebies. And I think industries ask for freebies is not going to be heard by the finance minister. There will be a few specific sectors where there may be some incentives relating to growth in line with what the government's already announced, things like green hydrogen, etc., coal gasification, green hydrogen. But beyond these industries, in line with what is consistently already developed as a roadmap by the government, I don't think too much more can be expected.
Okay. So Ashish, the belief was right that the government has done the heavy lifting. At some point of time, the private sector will come in. The private sector has not come in because the private sector is not seeing demand. Completely fair, and therefore the government will have to do the heavy lifting again. Thus far, signs seen in very few sectors, not across the board. Would that be a fair assessment? And therefore, would you believe that budget, post-budget, the full-fledged signs of government capex may come in? Because we are undershooting the capex targets quite significantly. We may not even meet them because the economy may not be able to absorb the actual targets laid out initially, right, in Feb last year. So my question is, can the government return to normalcy in Feb and March? And would that be a shot in the arm?
I agree entirely with that statement. I think capex from the government was short of expectations for a couple of quarters, whatever the reasons may be. But this coming budget and this coming cycle, that can pick up, and that can be the shot in the arm. I agree 100%.
Okay, and just wondering, I heard you say this couple of quarters, right? So did we see some signs of a pickup, maybe in sectors that you cater to or otherwise, in Q3 or in Jan of 2025?
I think our earnings are a week away, so I can't, it's a quiet period. I would say yes, there has been a couple of areas where we would have liked to see the same robust demand we have seen in the past. There were definitely signs of a slowdown. I've been saying that for a few months now. I do think late in December and January, there has been a pickup, which I think will, with a lot of the announcements that we hope to now see, will create momentum. Yep. So I think December, January looks like things are starting to turn, but too early to say.
On the private spending point of view, Mr. Bhandari, because we've spoken quite a bit about how Capex has been lagging. We hope that there will be improvement on Capex, and we'll wait and see. We'll know in maybe 48 hours or so. But on private spending, what is the kind of trend that you're seeing, and are you seeing any pickup there?
So that's where I said, yeah, I think we had quite a few cases for a few months where we would have shaken hands with customers, projects would have been designed, worked upon, but the financial closure would not happen. And they would get delayed, in some cases, even pickup of equipment for what is manufactured and kept ready at the factories. These were things that we had not seen for a few years in India. It seemed like we were moving much faster from conceptualization to decision-making to execution. And it felt like for a few months in between, that portion slowed down after the elections. Yeah, and it's a longer discussion on what those root causes and reasons are. I think end of December and then in January, looks like things are starting to improve, but it's too early to tell. Yeah, and what India has going for it relative to the rest of the world is domestic demand. And domestic demand through private capex or otherwise has to kick in. Otherwise, the macro environment globally right now is quite an uncertain one. So India has to have domestic demand at the heart of its growth story for next year and maybe the next few years.
The green energy front, and I suppose I should ask you specifically about mining as well, because that's important for you. Anything that you are looking out for or earmarking as far as the budget is concerned?
There are three areas in particular where we'll be looking out for how the market unfolds. The first is green hydrogen, in which a lot of policy decisions have been announced, some regulatory framework also. We would like to see that defined a lot more clearly with very specific budgets for green hydrogen. The second one is bio-CNG, and the shift, the way the government has created an industry for ethanol as a substitution for petrol, starting to create the framework for bio-CNG as a replacement for natural gas, for which there is significant growing demand in India. And then kind of a general framework on green financing coming into the entire green energy sector in a much, much bigger way. I think, and I mean, this is in addition to advanced biofuels, coal gasification. There are a whole host of the whole EV industry, mobility, multiple industries, but the three that are most relevant to Thermax, I'm speaking from that point of view, and just getting green financing frameworks in place, which will then encourage many other private capex and related projects to take off as well.
All right, thank you so much for speaking with us, Ashish, and a pleasure to hear such clear, unvarnished answers on what is being expected from the budget. So that was Thermax on what their wish list is.